Hi everyone, today I would like to share with you my top 5 blunders made by former world champions to remind us that to err is human. Even the best players who ever lived can make very basic mistakes. So let's start with the first one. Here in this position, former world champion Tigran Petrosian had this very dominant position. Pretty much all of white pieces are better than black pieces. Black also has weaknesses all around. E4, G5. So this position is just positionally winning for white. And here white played the move knight to G5, but this simply hangs the queen on D6, and after knight takes D6, white resigned. So here white simply had to move the queen, for example to A3 or even to C7, and white has a much better position. And by the way, if I go one move before, here in this position, black played the move knight from D4 to F5. So black played a retreating move. And as we'll see, these retreating moves are very often related to blunders. Or at least I'll make this case because many of the positions that I chose involve retreating moves. So here black has a very bad position, but this retreating move at least attacks the queen, so it was a very practical try by black. And before I move on to the second position, let me thank you all because my channel recently got 100 subscribers. This channel would literally didn't exist without you all, so thanks a lot for supporting it. And if you haven't subscribed already, you might consider doing it, as you will be supporting this channel to grow even further, and you will be notified whenever I upload new content. So thanks again, and let's move on. In this game we have former world champion Anatoly Karpov playing as black. And here black could have developed the bishop, for example, to c5 or to e7, planning to castle. But here black played the move bishop to d6, which is already quite surprising because we see that black has two pieces that are potentially hanging. And in fact here, black missed the retreating move queen to d1. So here, the queen goes back to d1, it goes back to its initial square, but it attacks the bishop and the knight, and there is actually no way to meet this threat, this fork that white has. So here black resigned because black is going to lose either a bishop or a knight. So it seems that we humans, we have some problems to evaluate retreating moves correctly. Very often they are not good moves, but in this particular position, this is just the best move in the position because it allows white to win a piece. Now let's move on to the next position, and here we have former world champion Vladimir Kramnik playing as black. And here the reason for the blunder might be the fact that the Kramnik was playing against a computer, against a chess engine. He was not playing against a human who might blunder very often, but against a system that will pretty much never make bad moves. So here Kramnik played the move queen to e3, inviting this queen trade, but black simply missed this move queen to h7, which gives a checkmate. Another reason might be that this pattern with the knight on f8, white's knight on f8, is pretty rare, but even so this was a very shocking blunder by black. So here black pretty much has to play the move king to g8 in order to avoid this checkmate, and the game could have continued knight to g6, and now black can try this idea, inviting the queen trade. If white trades queen, then this pawn is going to be very fast, and black's king will stop this passed e-pawn. That's why here white would have to play queen to d5, giving a check, and after king to h7, which is the only move, knight to f8, just forces a perpetual check, after king to h8, and knight to g6. So this would have been the logical conclusion of the game. Now let's move on to the next blunder. Here we have former world champion Vishy Anand or Vishy Anand. And the game was very short, so let's check it from the beginning. After e4, e5, knight to f3, black played knight to f6, leading to the Petrov defense. Here white took on e5, and after d6, knight to f3, knight takes e4. This is all well-known theory. And here white played knight to c3, which is one of the main moves in the position. And here black's main move is to take on c3, although knight to f6 has been played. But instead in this position, Vishy Anand tried bishop to f5, which is actually a terrible blunder because after queen to e2, we get this pin on the knight. So here white has ideas to play d3, since the knight cannot move. For example, after d5, d3 is very strong. That's why the only way to break the pin and hold the knight is to play queen to e7. But in this case, after knight to d5, black simply cannot hold the position together, because if the queen stays on the e-file to avoid d3 by white, then black will lose even more material. For example, after queen to e5, white simply takes on e5, or after queen to e6, then white takes on c7, forking the king and the queen. So after bishop to f5 and queen to e2, Anand resigned because black is just losing a lot of material. And in the next position we have former world champion Garry Kasparov, for many considered the best ever. And in this position, which is quite complicated, we have a lot of imbalances. Black has the bishop pair, but on the other hand, white might have this d4 square for its pieces. For example, a knight might go there. Black also has this pass c pawn that might become strong in an ending. We have a lot of imbalances in the position. It is quite complicated, but black is doing very well. If black just plays normal moves, for example, rook to e8, trying to activate the rook on the e-file. But instead here black played a retreating move. So we see that whenever we have these moves, we need to be alert because they are very often related to blunders. So here black played bishop to c8, challenging this knight on f5, which is quite annoying. But here black missed a very strong tactical idea, which is the move rook takes d5. And black cannot take the rook. If black captures with the knight, then queen takes g7 is a checkmate. And if queen takes d5, then knight to e7 forks the king and the queen. That's why black is already having a lot of trouble. Here Kasparov played queen to e8, but after bishop takes e4, black still cannot capture the rook on d5, so black resigned. And now I'd like to make an honorable mention. Even though this is not a top blunder, it was very shocking, particularly if we consider that this happened during a world championship match, and the moves that were played before that blunder were simply spectacular. So let's take a look at this position, on which we have two former world champions, Vesely and Topalov playing against Vladimir Kramnik. Here it is white to play. This queen on c2 is being attacked. So here white played a very fantastic move. White took on g6, just trying to open the g-file to attack black's king. If black captures, then this will lead to a checkmate attack after white opens the g-file. Here we have a double check, and if black captures on h7, then rook to g7 would start a checkmate attack. If black plays king to h6, then f5 is very strong. Or if king to h8, rook to g8, king to h7, white brings the other rook to g7, forcing the king to h6, and here f5 is just very strong. If the king goes to h5, then rook to h8 would lead to checkmate. Black can delay the checkmate, for example, with bishop to g5, but after rook takes g5, white still has a checkmate attack against black's king, so this is going to be game over pretty soon. So here, black didn't capture the queen on c2 and played the move h5, which makes a lot of sense. Black doesn't want to open the g-file, and here white insisted by playing g7. So again, white has the rook and the queen under attack, but white simply ignores this. So g7 is a pretty amazing move, with the same idea to open the g-file. And if black moves the knight, then queen to g7 would come, so that would be pretty crushing. That's why black tried taking the rook on g4, which makes sense. Here white took on f8, and the position here is extremely complicated. Here black captured with the bishop, which as we see was not a very good continuation. Taking with the king was better, and here the game could have continued queen to h7, and white is going to get a perpetual, but according to my analysis, not more than that. Instead, after bishop takes f8, here white missed a very simple win, so that's why I consider this a very important blunder, particularly since white played very spectacular moves previously. So I'm pretty sure that if white was given this position to start with, he would have found the win pretty easily, but we need to consider all the moves that were played previously that were very complicated. So here white could have simply played rook takes g4, just grabbing a pawn, and this would just lead to a winning attack. So if the king goes to f7, then queen to h7 is just a forced checkmate. And similarly, if king to h8, then white simply gives checks. So this is just a very natural way to attack. So I'm pretty sure that Topalov saw these lines. If the king moves, then queen to h7 is going to be a checkmate. Black can try bishop to h6, but white is still attacking and forcing a checkmate. For example, after king to g8, queen to h7, and rook to f6 is a checkmate. So after rook takes g4, bishop to g7 makes more sense to try to stop the attack. And here the follow-up was simply queen to c7. So here we just attack on g7 with two pieces. There's no way for black to defend the bishop. Rook to e7 would fail to queen takes e7. So this is just a winning position for white. White is going to checkmate pretty soon. And maybe here white missed the idea that after queen to f1, white needs to defend against this check with knight to g1. So bishop to g1 or rook to g1 would be bad because black would simply capture the knight, but knight to g1, again, a retreating move here would be very strong. Maybe white missed this move because a knight going back to g1 is quite strange. Maybe that was the reason why he missed this line. And here black doesn't have any other checks. g2 is covered, h3 and f3 are covered by the knight. So this is just game over. So that's why this was a pretty shocking blunder, because after finding moves like h takes g6, sacrificing a queen, and after h5, insisting on this idea, and after black took on g4, white taking on f8, and bishop takes, rook takes on g4, looks like a very simple move considering the previous moves that white played. In the game, white played queen to g6, which is not a blunder, strictly speaking, because white still has a good position, but it is much harder to play it, because after bishop to g7, now rook to e7 will defend the bishop. So the game will continue. White tried f5. The game was very complicated, even though it was objectively good for white. White even managed to lose the game because the position now gets really messy. So let me end with another blunder. And here again we have a retreating move. Here white played the move knight to c1. White should have probably tried bishop to d3 to release the pressure on e2. But here white tried knight to c1. So let me know in the comments why this is a bad move. Just in case, let me tell you that black cannot capture on f1 because now the queen on b2 is being attacked. So let me know why knight to c1 was a blunder and how did black continue in the game.